Well, we want to jump right in, and I know you do a lot of work in Canada around this whole thing of sexuality and gender. Can you
Yes.
just give us an overview of what you do in Canada before we jump right in?
Okay, for sure. Well, my lane, um, first of all, I am a retired psychotherapist, but also I'm an ordained pastor. But my lane, as far as research, has been in the area of trauma and attachment, same-sex attraction, and the whole area of the gender confusion and transgender phenomenon. So that's kind of where I've been focusing the last, oh, I don't know, 8 years or so. So in that, as you said, I ended up retiring from practice so that I could focus on working in advocacy with politicians and church leaders to bring awareness to this issue and I will call it a devious agenda to sexualize our children. And yesterday I was speaking to about 200 people in Canada at a church, which was really excellent because the church has been slow to become aware of what's going on in the culture. And that's not unusual. Sometimes I always feel like the church itself, and I'm talking broadly, is about 10 years behind whatever's happening in the culture. And that's about exactly where they are with this issue. So, um, but yesterday was a wonderful experience for me because it was a free reformed church, so from
Hmm.
kind of the Reformed tradition. Uh, and there were about 200 people, but I would say three-quarters of those were young parents, and that's exciting. So because it's been very difficult getting parents to come out. This was on a Saturday, so that helped. But parents are now becoming aware of what is happening with the sex ed curriculum. So for me, I think I've written several books. I've written 6 books. One's on trauma, but the rest are all on gender and sexuality and the sexualization of our culture and understanding why and how we got to where we are right now in Canada, which is about 10 steps ahead of you in Barbados. And that's why I think it's so important what you're doing right now to address some of the things that are transpiring, because one of the things that we understand in Canada, the US, and much of the West now is that there is a really strong push, and it's not just strong, it's a strong armed push to actually have a curriculum, a very sexualized curriculum from kindergarten or JK right through to the end of university. But it's really changing the brains of our young children. It's sexualizing them. It's making them focus on sexual issues. It's teaching them sexual practices in the classroom. They not only, they talk about things that no 5-year-old needs to know. In fact, most teenagers don't even need to know. And so
And so,
they're
so this
encouraging
is
those.
what's happening. This is what's happening in Canada at the moment.
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes. And what's also happened in the last 5 years in Canada, we have just seen an explosion of young children who now have decided that they were born in the wrong body, that they are, and the term is transitioning, um, and the term is not yeah, to be transgender. Transgender itself is not a medical term, it's a political term. The term before to describe individuals who believed they were in the wrong sex, or they wanted to become the other sex, they were called transsexual, which was more accurate for sure. The reality is, though, that the teachers in our education system and right throughout our culture, parents as well are not only encouraged to agree with a child's thought process in this idea that they can be born in the wrong body, which is an impossibility, and parents are, yeah, I would say strong armed into agreeing with the child's delusion, because when
Mm-hmm.
you are not facing reality, that becomes a delusionary tactic, and so that's really what is happening in Canada and the US. And if anyone disagrees, if you would dare to say that maybe this isn't the right way to go to affirm a child, because that's the term used, and actually in psychology and in any counseling field since about 2015, we have had to affirm. It's called affirmation therapy. You cannot dispute with the child's thoughts that they are in the wrong body, and you can't challenge that. You can't tell them that perhaps they need to take a step back and think about this. You have to encourage them. That's really what they're being mandated to do. So this is really scary, and I mean it sets the child on this I would say a conveyor belt, like a factory conveyor belt, toward medicalization and then further into mutilation of their bodies, which is a horrific thing. The latest book I wrote is called Ultimate Deception: the Truth of Gender Affirming Care. And so it talks all about that, and I have the latest research that really refutes all of that, the idea that you should affirm a child, because what you're doing is lying to the child. And
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things as parents and as teachers in the education system that you have to take account of. What are you doing to this child's mind when you lie to them? And
Mm-hmm.
you tell them, yeah, okay, so now you're a boy. Okay, so we'll call you Sam. And you go through all of that. And then this child gets to be like 25, and they realize that they've made the biggest mistake of their entire life. Their parents
Mm-hmm.
have encouraged them. Their teachers have told them, yes, this is right. The doctors have prescribed all kinds of medication, and then many of these young girls, even as young as 13, are having double mastectomies in the
Mm-hmm.
hopes or the idea that they can become male, which is, it's just such an insidious indoctrination. So there you go. That's kind of an overview of what's
Yeah, of
been
what
going
is
on.
happening. As you said, you are miles ahead of us, and your job, you're on here tonight to say to Barbados and the Caribbean, you have to wake up, you have to push back. You know,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. I know that in when we were in Poland, as we listened to Andrea Williams, she made mention of a certain phrase in our child protection bill in Barbados, and it talked about in the best interest of the child. And I know that everybody there was saying, "Oh no, this is dangerous." What are your
Yeah.
thoughts about that? You're so Andrea spoke yesterday as someone from the UK, and I think it'd be good for Barbadians to hear you from Canada speak about the child protection bill, at least that section of it.
That's right. Well, I would say, like, who determines what's in the best interest of the child? And I mean, this is all under the guise of child protection. And I would have thought that you had some pretty good laws of child protection already on the books.
Mm-hmm.
Your social services, they already have child protection acts, just like in Canada. And then this one comes along, and it looks very similar, and it has a lot of good things in it. But then you come to this place, who determines what's in the best interest of the child? And in Canada, let me tell you this: the parents do not have rights like they've had in years past. Actually, in the words of one transsexual man, he said, actually, the parents don't have any rights. The children must have the rights. And that is very much, and I'll share in a little while about why that is so important for this group, is this sense that the child gets to choose. The child gets to choose who they are, what they kind of, how they want to behave, but then very deep in this is how they identify. And this is all about, to me, this is about what is identity. And it strikes very much at the heart of the gospel, because our identity, we have an identity already. We have a God-given identity. But this whole curriculum and what's in the best interest of the child, I think this is really up for grabs, because the teachers will say, well, this is in the best interest of the child, and the parent will go, wait a minute, I don't think so. And then social services will come in and say, well, we agree with the teacher, and we see this happening, and we don't think the parent is competent to make these decisions. And it's certainly in this area of sexuality, that if, and back to this affirmation, if a parent refuses and says, no, Sally, you are not Billy, you're Sally, you're my little girl. And if that child in Canada reports that their parent will not let them dress like a boy, or claim they are a boy, or use a boy's name, those parents can be charged.
So let me ask you something, Dr. Gillies. In Canada, do they have a bill that is similar to our child protection bill that will give the state that right that they could actually punish the parent or remove the parent from the home? I mean, remove the child from the home
Yes.
if the parent doesn't follow what they assume is the best interest of that child. Do you have some kind of legislation in place like that?
We do. In Ontario, where I live, it was Bill 77 was the first one that was implemented, that really restricted the rights of the parents. I mean, there's other bills, but that one really, really began to destroy parental rights. And I mean, this is the saddest thing, because, there is no one that loves their child like the parent. No children's aid worker loves like the parent. No teacher loves like the parent. And I'm not suggesting that there aren't some outlier parents that are not good parents. Of course, there always have been throughout history. But let's talk about the general public. Parents will always work for the best interest of their child, and because they know their child. And so what this kind of legislation does is really rob the parent of the right to make decisions on behalf of their child. And that's really scary, because who could determine the best interests
Of the child, and we want Barbadians to understand that this is a bill that they are looking to pass by the end of this year. Actually, it should be in a couple weeks. It's gone through the parliament already, and it's going to, according to them, regardless, people. So there are some people who are questioning some of the things in the bill, and what they're saying is that regardless of what you're saying, this bill is going through. Another section in the bill says that the removal. This is section 3. The removal of a child from his parents shall only occur where it is necessary to protect the child from the risk of serious harm or danger. The challenge with this is that we don't know who determines, right, the interpretation of serious harm or danger. Do you have these same kinds of issues in Canada with what's happening there?
Yes. And see, this is because the language of these bills is very generalized. And so you have this, like, if a parent is being, or if a child is being physically harmed, absolutely, we need to do something to protect that child, from the parent who is harming the child. When it
Mm-hmm.
comes to this whole issue, we have this sense that harm is becoming very subjective. It's who decides what's harmful for the child. And it's not so much about the physical abuse coming from a parent. This is more dealing with harms on the level of psychological harm. And that brings us into a whole area where, if you have individuals and you have psychologists, psychiatrists, clinical workers who are very much trained in kind of a new way of thinking, actually, and they see harm in the whole concept of the parent not agreeing with the child, then that can be very dangerous for both the parent and the child, because it puts them in a place where the parent is it's very scary, because if they disagree with the child, then the child can be taken from their home. And
Mm-hmm.
in this area, in this whole sense of
And
sexuality,
do you see that happening in Canada? Do they have cases of that in Canada?
there have been there have been a few cases. It hasn't happened a lot. Most of the time, I have to say, in Canada, parents have just gone along and decided that, it's less, they don't want to fight with the government, and they don't know. They don't understand, because they have not been taught the danger of affirming care. They don't
Mm-hmm.
understand that they are being told by the doctor, by teachers, that this is a good thing for your child to transition, or to become a gay or lesbian or bisexual, that this is normal, and that it's good for your child. Well, we know, I mean, from years and years of research, that individuals, and this isn't taking pot shots at the LGBT community, but we know that there are all kinds of medical and mental health issues that are very, very much uh, exaggerated in this community compared to other populations, and they aren't being cared for. So there's this whole thing that we don't teach the whole truth. We what we're seeing is there's I would call it an agenda to teach a sexualizing of our children, but we're not teaching them the dangers. We don't teach them
Yeah.
the dangers of all of those things. And we don't
Yes.
talk about love or marriage in all of these things. That's went out the window years ago, probably 2 decades ago. Abstinence, you cannot talk about abstinence or anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. It's all about sexual practice and what brings the child pleasure. And
Yeah.
I'll say this, and I hope there's no children listening, but in British Columbia, which is on the west coast of Canada, this school year, so just this past September, a young child, I think about 5 years old, came home and told the parents what their activity, their homework was. And their homework was to not tell their mom and dad. This is what the teacher told this child. They were in kindergarten. Um, that they were not to tell their mom and dad, but they were to go to find a very private place in their home. Their mom and dad would never find them, and that they could self pleasure in those
Wow.
places, and teaching the children how to do that, like what
Mm.
that is, and what they're 5 years old. This is the kind of thing, what we didn't see, parents didn't see this on happening. It's been gradually coming in, but now we have a lot more teachers that have come out of the very woke universities, and
Yeah.
they do not have the same moral ethic as the parents, and they have been really saturated with a sexualized perspective to start with in the university. So we're reaping some of what's been sown over decades. And yes, it's really, really tough. It's tough
Yeah.
for parents, but they're starting to stand up, Marcia. They're starting to
They're okay. I'm hoping that with us, doing these shows, and I know that we're working on getting you physically in Barbados at the beginning of December. We were meeting on that today, and I'll tell you some more on that. But I want to tell our viewers that we're working on getting Dr. Anne Gillies in Barbados, and that what we thought of doing as well is at the end of your presentation that we do, we put on the performance, so that it closes out with Praise Academy doing that performance that they disqualify, which we're going to talk about as well. But I want to ask you something though. Do you think the bills, these pieces of legislation, that they are vague for a reason? That there's a reason the language is so vague, as it's talking about the best interest of the child and what is, in the harm, in danger, in harm and danger. Do you think that there's a reason behind it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think there's it's not that the whole entire bill is awful.
Mm-hmm.
There's some good parts in it. And isn't that often the way, that things creep in? There's
Mm-hmm.
some good stuff, and
Good
then
stuff, yeah.
yeah, and then there's these things that you gotta go, well, I don't know about that. And those are the things that we need to start up and go, wait a minute, what does this really mean? And I think, one of the things is emotional abuse and what causes psychological pain. And in Canada, one of the things that kind of the rhetoric, I think, is what I would call it, is that if we do not transition children, if we do not allow them to go through the social transitioning in the schools, change their name, have pronouns, all of those things that have become rampant in Canada, if we do not allow them, then we are torturing our children. It's psychological torture. And you
Mm,
see what a slippery slope that is, because who's determining the torture? This isn't torturous to say no to a child's delusion, but when everything is upside down, then disagreeing with the child about their biological sex or their ideas of assigning identities and pronouns, that if you disagree with that, that then can be psychological torture. That's
oh
how the
wow.
wording gets used, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's very vicious. It's very vicious.
Mm-hmm. In a nutshell, can you tell us what is, because I heard you speaking on this in Poland, um, what is behind the LGBTQ agenda? Of course, we know the people we're not talking about the people. We're talking about this agenda that is
Yes.
being pushed. What, in a nutshell, can you talk to us about that?
Well, I can. I think um, certainly it is all about the sexualizing of children. And one of the things I shared, and I actually have this, I may read a couple statements here. This I came across a document that was actually the transcript of an interview. Let me just move this over here so I can see it. It's not moving for me. Of course it's not. Sorry about that. But this was an interview done in 1980, and it was an academic setting. The interviewer was from Princeton University, and he had a lot of questions. The questions were very biased to start with, but the lady he was interviewing was a radical feminist named Kate Millett. You can Google her. And he was asking her about cross generational sex. See, they changed the topics. What that really is and the terms. What that really is incest. And he was wondering how that would fit into the sexual revolution. Remember, this is 1980. And what Millett says is, this is her quote, certainly one of children's essential rights. So get this in your mind, because it's about children's rights. One of children's essential rights is to express themselves sexually, primarily with each other, but with adults as well. So this is 1980, and this is academia. And the big picture really is the annihilation of humanity when it comes to the big picture. But when it comes to our children and what's going on with all of these pieces of legislation, it's really coming down to your children need the right to make the decision to have sex with adults. Well, no child.
Oh, pedophilia. So you're saying all of this, behind that agenda, not the people, but the agenda is
That's right.
pedophilia. Pedophilia is where we're heading. Mr. Franklin, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to open your mic, because this is, I know you've been saying this for a long time about this agenda, but you were saying something, Dr. Ann, before I think I cut you off.
Oh, well, there's a couple more things I might want to add from that just a minute. So she talks about sexual freedom of children is an important part of the sexual revolution. So you hear this. So this is 1980, and what we're seeing now is exactly the fulfillment of this. As a child, now listen to this, as child and adolescent sexuality reaches greater freedoms, the proximity of family members. Now, this is just sick. The proximity of family members makes one experiment and challenge the pedophilic taboo. Take that apart. So as a sexual freedom of children is important, and adult and child sexuality reaches greater freedoms, then because the child's in a family, the proximity of family members makes one experiment and challenge this taboo. I mean, this is mind-boggling, but this has been in academia for 40 years. And that's why we are having, a new generation of young people and young teachers who have been soaked and saturated in this kind of ideology. It's very disturbing. It's incredibly dangerous to our children.
My goodness. Do you have a comment on this, Caswell or Kimar? Go ahead.
Yes, I was making notes while um, Father Gillies was speaking. I didn't want to interrupt her because she was going quite well. But she was, one of the things that I made note of is this 5-year-old being told to go home and find a place to pleasure themselves. Prior to this period, that would have been called contributing to the delinquency of a minor.
Yes.
That's a long-standing common law offense. So what is happening with the laws and then, because here we have legislation that says that if you have sex with a person under the age of 16, you can't have consent. And so what has changed? What is making these people believe now that they can ignore all the norms, all the standards that we held dear and that was right for us for centuries? Now for them to come and say, okay, well, you can have sex with a baby if you choose, and if the baby is yours, no, you don't mind. This sounds more like evil. This sounds more satanic than what is the best interest of any child.
Well, it's sexual abuse, and see, this is the issue. When you think of this kind of suggestion or talking to a child even about such a thing, like what right does any teacher have to talk about those things to a child? It's not their child. And this is where parents need to start standing up and saying, don't talk to my kids about these things. You have no right. And yet, because of the education system here in Canada, which you do not want to incorporate in the Barbados, you have to stand up against this now because you have a window of opportunity to hopefully shut it down. In Canada, we're working on the other side. Go ahead.
No, we are getting there because right now there is a teacher at a school in Barbados who wanted a child to send pictures of his private parts to him. And the parents controlled to the ministry, complained to the ministry, they controlled to the principal. Principal did nothing about it. And the most they did was tell the teacher, well, you hold off, don't come to school for the time being. And so we are allowing this bad behavior, even here. So you are saying that you're 10 steps ahead of us, but no, we're catching up here. We're catching up really fast because we are learning how to do it.
Yeah, because we wanted to make a point there. We had in Barbados a case where a gentleman, I won't say his name because he works in the media, he had sex with a minor, a boy, right? And the case was represented by the Speaker of the House, Arthur Horder, and he was saying that it was consensual that the guy actually wanted it, so therefore it couldn't be raped. And then there was a challenge buggery laws based off that. So there was love between an adult and a minor, but that is against our laws. But our Attorney General came out and said that Barbados is too small for a sexual offenses registry against child rape, right? And that is crazy. Every country should have a domain where people who interfere with children sexually be listed on that to become a sexually registered offender. That even if you move from St. Michael to St. Thomas, the people in St. Thomas should know that you interfere with the children. If you go to work in a school, it should be on your file that you interfere with the children so that they will know not to hire you. But that's not the case in Barbados. We seem to want to put the pedophiles to run the program over the children. Right? There were even cases in Barbados where people were accusing MPs and prominent people in societies of going into the children's homes and raping little children. Right? A little child's mind is not developed to make the decisions to engage in such activities. I thought at 16 years old my mind would be mature, but it clearly wasn't. Right? The knowledge that I have now, when I was younger, I probably wouldn't have done some of the things I done at that age. So to ask a little child to be engaged in practices like that, one, the bodies are not ready for such, so it will bring damages to them. Because even some adult females, when they engage in sexual activities with some men, it damages the body. So think about a little child now, but this is a bigger agenda at play because if you remember something called Epstein Island, where big celebrities and politicians and all the rich billionaires of the world will go to this island to be having sex with little children. Right? We are changing Barbados into a space to allow the rich and famous to come into our island that if they want to get their king on with their little children, that there are no laws in place to lock them up. Because the laws in some of the countries where they originate from are too stringent on those type of relationships. So with enough money paying off government officials or whatever, they could pervert justice by financing a couple of these government institutions and encouraging them to change the laws like in what we have here in this child protection bill. And these influential rich people would now be coming to Barbados. And that's why we had that IDB survey, that sexual survey under the disguise of a computer science test.
Right.
That was a gauge to see how many young people are into this homosexual type of behavior and deviant behavior.
Yeah.
So
Let me just tell Dr. Gillies, excuse me, about the survey. I don't know if you remember me telling you about a survey that was done on the children in Barbados. They had over 200 and I think it's 280 questions to do, and the parents were not aware. I think I told you that we're not aware of them doing this survey, and some of the questions in the survey was asking the children about which gender they prefer, and if they feel suicidal, and if they, I guess, often do they have sex, and those kinds of things. Was being asked. Those kind of things were being asked in the survey, and the parents had no idea. It's one child who came out and spoke about that. So that is what Kimar is making reference to, and so we're wondering, saying it could be that they are trying to gather information on the children, because we don't know where that data has gone, and that was sponsored by the IDB. He also talks about Barbados not having a sex offenders registry in Barbados, because we do have a lot of abuse from the state, where the state, children in state care, in
Yes.
children's home, they have been molested. We have children in children in any care of the government in Barbados. They have been abused in terrible ways. Only about 2 years, they had a young girl tied up, by a chain, naked, and this is government care. So these are some of the things he's talking about, and I would love to hear your thoughts on whether we should have. Do you think that a sex offenders registry is important?
I think so. I mean, I think it's one way of keeping track of who's around your children, number one, and that they don't get jobs. One of the things you need to understand about pedophiles, and so I have a fair bit of experience with this because my first husband actually I found out after I had remarried that he had sexually abused our boys. I knew he was having homosexual affairs, and what I found out was that he and his boyfriends were sexually abusing my children. And that just, I mean, it was horrific, horrific. But the reality is that we need to know who these people are. They need more than just their hand slapped. They need to be getting good, lengthy prison sentences for abusing our children. But here's what I want to go back to academia and what the academics now. We understand that child abuse, and certainly from a psychological perspective, creates incredible trauma on the child, and chronic sexual abuse in the home, incest, is particularly damaging to a child's psychological, emotional, and physical being. And what academics now are saying, the reason there is no problem with child adult sex. The problem lies with how the parents perceive it. And they perceive it to be dangerous. They perceive it to be traumatizing. If the parents could only begin to understand and accept it, the children wouldn't be traumatized. This is the craziness of academics. And I mean, but people are like, it's
It's
it's it's so far out there. But it's back to, let's blame the parent for overreacting, because that way we can shut down the parent. The big agenda here is the deconstruction of family, which you're seeing left, right, and center over the last few decades for one reason or another. Fatherless homes, and parents, both parents out working, lack of child supervision. There's all kinds of things that are adding to the deconstruction of the family. But this particular issue is really, really a big one. And because it's going to become more and more, I think, out in the open and more insidious as the years go by if we don't stop this now. So I don't think I answered your question very well, but
No, no, no,
anyway.
no. No, you did. You did about the importance of having that registry
Yeah.
and to think that our attorney general. I mean, I couldn't believe he said that. That it's not, in a small place like Barbados, it's not really necessary. But as Mr. Franklin has been saying, we've had a lot of issues with teachers who are, we're seeing that pedophilia with teachers. We're seeing it with even politicians, where with MPs, and because there's no real structure, and any we do nothing really. There's no real protection of children. So like when we hear about the child protection bill, it's something that we all welcome, but then within it has some other things that's going on. I think, Caswell, do you have a question or a comment? I don't. I know we have a short time with you, and I have another question for you. But go ahead, Caswell.
And
Can you
it
restart? Your mic was muted. Can you restart?
I said I'd listened to Dr. Gillies, and I realized that we need to focus more on people like her to come to help our people
Yes.
realize what is going on in the world, because they're not listening to us anymore. They're listening to the politicians who bite them off. If international speakers, international people like Dr. Gillies will come out and speak, so we need to invite more of them, and we also need to put the information, like for instance, in your group, where they ban your group from performing, that should be international news. We shouldn't keep it home, because it will embarrass them in the short term, and that's all. Because politicians only deal with short term, they don't deal with any long term thing, because long term for them is 5 years. So we need to get people, and I wish we get. And I'm very grateful, ma'am, that you took the time out to come and speak to us tonight, because I learned a lot from you. And
the key is educating the parents into the dangers, and then activating them, activating the church, activating the parents to begin to speak out. But they need to be educated and understand what is true, because the government presents one perspective and sugarcoats it. But I did get a little chance to read through the child protection bill, just not everything, but one thing that was there, and it was on page 15. I can't remember which article it was, but page 15, and it's describing sexual abuse. And this is very good, because it says grooming for sexual exploitation. That's a good thing to have in this legislation. What we are seeing, what we're witnessing in Canada, is this grooming for sexual exploitation is happening in the classroom. Not every class, not every teacher. I want to make that clear. But overall, it is a sexual grooming. When you expose children to sexual ideas and a sexual expression and sexual behaviors before they are old enough to actually understand those, and you're explicitly showing them pictures, diagrams, not photographs. If it was photographs, it would be immediately parents would go, that's pornography. But interestingly enough, one of the library books that's used for, I think it's 8 and 10-year-olds, I bought a copy. I hate paying for these kind of books, but I wanted to see it and really see what was in it. And it was horrific. I mean, it was actual sexual positions and very explicit gay sex and heterosexual sex. And this is for young children. And my 31-year-old son was home, and I just opened the book randomly and said, take a look at this, Matthew. What do you think about this? And he just said, Mom, that's pornography. And I said, this is written for 10-year-olds. He said, that's disgusting. And it was. But you see, when we lower the inhibitions of children by doing this, that's sexual grooming. That's grooming them for sexual exploitation. And that's why I think, and I say this, that we are seeing sexual abuse in our classrooms, and it's not being taken care of. It's not being identified because it's all under the guise of a sex ed.
Yeah. You know, and go ahead, Caswell, and then I'll ask for my final question.
If you see grooming as wrong, right, and I agree that it is wrong. So when you take a child, 5 years old and 6 years old, and tell them that they are supposed to be sexual creatures and it's good to have sex and go do it in the corner, in the closet, that kind of stuff. That is, so I don't understand why you can be saying on one hand that one of those is good and one is bad.
So say that again. I didn't quite understand. Maybe slow down. It's my hearing and your accent. So
I will. I remember I spoke. I was in Canada for a number of years ago, and everybody just telling me slow down. Like I forgot that I'm. You know. What I'm saying, like you were referring to our section 15. I'm sorry, page 15 is section 2 of the act that says what grooming is, and that grooming for the purpose of sexual exploitation, pornography, sexting, or cyber abuse. That's an offense. That's a criminal offense. However, if that is a criminal offense, what more is a criminal offense than asking children to go and do these things in their closet? You know, that is grooming too.
Yes. Yeah. When we have to identify it and call it for what it is.
So these people don't seem to know what they want. You know, they just want to abuse children, and somehow they get their terms mixed up. Child abuse is child abuse. Whether you say even with the psychologists and the counselors and stuff, they're abusing children when they try to tell them that they can go this way and go the next. Because I'm a father of 5 children, 5 grandchildren, and I would not sit idly by and hear that one of my children being taught this stuff. You know, but a lot of people are afraid to speak up and to stand up, and because they have the power of the state behind them, and will criminalize a person like me, because trust me, my response would have been criminal if they were doing that to my child. But we have the state now, and the state is pushing these things, and that's the problem we have. That's the major problem that we have. It is being pushed by the state. Once when it was just the academia they were talking about, which everybody always thought they're mad people anyhow. Because the people sit down in universities and sit down and come with nonsense. A lot of people don't take them on. But no, it is being done on the floor of Parliament.
Yes.
So, and people have to stand up. If they do not stand up, I don't know what will happen, because I can't imagine an adult 15, 20 years older than the child doing nonsense to them. No, but it seems to be okay if the law allows it. But whatever the law allows is not necessarily moral or right. It's just legal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. The state's mandating things that should be the responsibility of the parent. Yeah. And that's when you see the state is taking over, and that's what's happening in Canada. They want to be the parent. They want to control the child. They do not want the parent to be to control the child. Right. And that little piece that I was saying, I actually did a little podcast about 2 weeks ago on that whole issue, reading a lot of that interview, and there's so much more to it. But, you know, the reality is, and like you said, that we as parents now, and you particularly now, is when you need to stand firm. You need to get involved in your in parent groups at your school. you need to get involved. I don't know what your education system has for school boards and things like that, and whether trustees are elected. They are in Canada, but you need now parents to get involved, get on the school boards, be a voice right now, because what we have found is that the people who are pushing, and I want to say this, it's not, I don't know how to explain, not the general LGBT individuals, it's the activists that are pushing. Many gays and lesbians are totally unaware of what's going on in the schools. Most of them don't have children, but when they're made aware, most of them are pretty upset themselves that this kind of education is happening in the schools. But it is the activists that are pushing it, and they are really they are the ones who are in the forefront, and they are the ones who have strategically gotten into parliamentary positions, and places where they can make decisions, and on school boards. And so they become teachers, which is a wonderful vocation, but only if you have the best interest in the child in hand, and you're not trying to promote any kind of ideology. And so there's things as parents that and individuals that you can begin to take action. You can begin to be the decision makers in these areas, and that will really, really change the tide. But it means you need to activate now.
Yeah, yeah.
Miss Gillies, sorry,
Go ahead.
Marcia,
Kima. No, go ahead, Kima.
yes, I wanted to respond to what Miss Gillies was saying in terms of persons using the parliamentary privileges to impact on things like the Child Protection Bill. I mentioned earlier that the Speaker of the House was the lawyer, the legal representative for the person who raped the little boy in Barbados. And through that court case, the buggery laws of Barbados were challenged through a court case. So the buggery law was struck down in court. So as opposed to the government going front on in terms of bringing a bill to Parliament to give these rights or whatever to whoever wants them, they set up one of their parliamentary representatives, who is the Speaker of Parliament, to represent alleged pedophile in a court case, which then set up the buggery laws in Barbados to be struck down so that he could not be charged for buggery, right? So the argument that they're using is that these two fellas, one over 18, one below, with 16, one over 16, one below 16, they're saying that the guy wanted it. Like, this is the child below 16. They're saying that he wanted it. So it was not a case of rape or forced sexual activities or anything, but they engaged in sexual activity. But the fact that he was below 16 is what got him charged for buggery, right? So, and the law being struck down, the buggery law being struck down, this now gives the alleged pedophile leeway to say no, every law is changed, that he did nothing wrong, right? So I just wanted some feedback from you on a scenario as, as such.
So you're
Go ahead.
asking about, I don't know the age of the child, other than they were under 16. And, this is the whole issue, is that if you can claim that it was consensual, that's the push in this whole area of sexualization, so that children will be groomed so that they'll receive this kind of interference, sexual interference, without complaining about it. The problem is and I want to say this, that no child without being groomed is going to want to have sex with an adult. But if a young boy has been sexually abused, number one, in their home, perhaps incest, or perhaps it's a neighbor, if there's been some sexual assault, they are more likely in the future to be sexually assaulted. It's all there in the research, boys or girls. That doesn't mean they want it. It just means that they have lowered their guard, and they've come to this place almost mentally where it's like, well, this is the way things are. And that's a really sad thing, that adults would take advantage of a child's vulnerability. And so, yeah, you have these people that are saying, well, yeah, the child wants it. Well, that's it. Let's apply the law as it's stated. Let's not get into whether the child wants to have sex or not. Let's apply the law. No sex under 16, unless no sex under 16, and no adult interference, right? If we could do that, because children don't need to be sexually active.
Yeah.
That's the agenda of the left. That's the agenda of these oh, that's interesting. Indecent assault. Sexual assault's now called indecent assault. I'm just reading that. Here's something else I want to say. We don't even understand what sexual assault is anymore, because what does that really mean? It used to be that the child was raped or molested, right? And molested kind of was that all-embracing thing that maybe there was no penetration, but they had been molested. Now we call it all sexual assault, which minimizes children who are raped. And that does such an injustice to the child, really. So we have to really state what's going on. And I think you're right that it's very sad that, you can have politicians who actually may want to enforce the law, and then you can have judges that overturn it. We see that in Canada a lot. So I don't know if I've answered your question very well, but we just have to stand for truth, and we need to make sure the laws, as they are written, are actually enforced.
That they're enforce the laws. Go ahead, Mr. Franklin. How much before you go? How much more time do we have, Dr. Ann?
I'm okay for another 10 minutes or so.
10 minutes. Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah.
You see, the problem in Barbados is that the courts, I keep telling you on this show that I have no confidence in the courts in Barbados because they interpret the law willy-nilly. Because we have a case here recently where a man had sexual intercourse with a child, and he was raising that child as his daughter, right? It turned out that he was not the real father, but he didn't know that at the time. DNA testing meant that the mother had intercourse with somebody else while he was the incumbent, and they got this child, and he raised this child. He had sex with this child, and he got away because it wasn't incest. No, but it was still an offense to have sex with a minor. That's still the law in Barbados, but we always find ways to let the fellow off, And the next thing I want to draw your attention is that we had a judge striking down the law saying buggery is unconstitutional. We can't. But in Jamaica, they tried that, and the Court of Appeal in Jamaica said, "Oh no, it is not." So we come from the same tradition, the same basic laws that came out from England in 1864, whatever. These were, and yet still, one court in Barbados is saying it is right and the court in Jamaica saying it is wrong. You know, so you got to see it is just who the person is. And I'm saying right now that judges should stop legislating in Barbados or for Barbados, because something like that should have gone to Parliament. And the Attorney General, when that law was struck down, because he is the person who's supposed to protect the laws in Barbados, he should have appealed. But no, we don't appeal because who we have in Parliament, who we have leading.
Right. Yeah.
That's why we need godly, moral leadership. That's
Yes.
why we need to encourage people. And I would say Christians particularly. And I don't know if I've got a lot of feedback happening or what, there's some noise, but I don't usually. But anyways, to run for office, because we need people who share our views and values and want to protect children from these kind of things. And so, you know, we really need to encourage people to get into positions, because that's the strategy of the activists, is to get into high level positions so they can change the culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, we see you have probably about 8 minutes left, and I want to ask you about the Praise Academy. You'd have seen a little bit of it when you were in Poland, of them performing and hearing that they've been disqualified because they're saying that, you know, you're either male or female. I just want to hear your thoughts about that. And what do you say to Barbados and to the Caribbean about that, something like that happening? What should be the response of Barbadians or Caribbean people?
I'm not sure that I saw that. I heard a little bit about it, but it was just illuminate me a little bit more on that.
They showed Victor being in Barbados. This was a video with Victor being in Barbados, and then the kids were dancing and singing.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and then later we they explained that this group was disqualified from the a national competition in Barbados. So I'm not sure if you saw that. You were there at that event.
I heard that, but I didn't understand why they were disqualified.
Well, they were disqualified, they said, because of the content. They said that the content was discriminating against a particular group, because they were saying that there are only two genders.
Only two sexes,
and
only two sexes.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's why. Okay,
Mhm.
okay, that helps me understand. Well, and
No,
that's
no, they were saying there were only two genders.
yeah, two genders. See, there's the language again, folks. And one of the things that I am always saying to people, there are two sexes. Let's go back to the original language. Let's not use their language, because gender really is another term that is like, what does that mean? You know, but now we use gender, we've replaced sex with gender, and gender is simply really how you feel about your own sexuality, your femininity or masculinity. But anyways, nevertheless, what they're saying is that because, you know, you're specifying there's only two genders, two sexes, that's somehow discriminatory. And that's exactly what's happened. That would happen in Canada because it's all under this guise of inclusivity. We want to be inclusive. Well, we want to be inclusive, but of everyone that except heterosexuals. And there are only two sexes. There are only two sexes. That's all there are. There will never be any more than two sexes. What the agenda has done, what the LGBTQ activists and the educators have done, is really muddy the water with this idea that you can be multiple genders, which, of course, who knows? You know, people are deciding they're cats now. There's all kinds of identities. So I hear what you're saying. Those are the very things that we're fighting in Canada, and that here the children are being punished. Children are being punished because they can't be involved in different things, because you have a belief system, you have values, and that's really sad. I think it's the pendulum is going too far. I think we're going to see the pendulum start to swing back, but it hasn't quite reached that point yet. It's going to implode. Because people are getting really tired of this in Canada and the US. They're starting to get really tired of it. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. What's your final word to the church in Barbados?
Educate, educate, educate. Get yourself educated on what this is all about. Get involved in your municipal, your provincial, your federal, I don't know what you call those, political entities in Barbados, but get involved. As parents, speak out, defend your children, and for the church to stand up to biblical sexuality. We need to stand firm on biblical sexuality. And that's really, really important, because that is what has been the foundation of our society. Even before Jesus, it was still the foundation of our society. For us, it goes back to Adam and Eve. That's the basis. Man, woman, marriage, family. We want to stand for those truths.
Amen. Well, we're looking forward to having you in December in Barbados. And at that time, I know that there will be many who are going to come, parents in particular, who they might be having children or young people who are struggling with same-sex attraction. And I know that you'll be talking a lot on those occasions about trauma and how that connects to that kind of those kind of choices and experiences. So we want to thank you for being on here tonight and educate, as you've always said. And it's a pleasure having you, ma'am, and we look forward to seeing you in Barbados, physically in Barbados.
That will be wonderful. I really have enjoyed talking with you all, and I thank you that you're really looking very carefully at everything that's happening, and you're aware, and you're doing something about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you in December.
Yes, just get back to me pretty quick.
Yes.
Okay,
God bless.
Yes,
Bye-bye.